All right, today we're going to unravel a legal case that's honestly more like a detective story. It's got these two huge puzzles that the courts had to solve before they could reach a final verdict. This is the incredible case of Wilshire versus Essex.
And it all really boils down to this one big question. When a doctor makes a mistake, especially a doctor who's still new and learning, how should we judge them? What's the fair standard? It's a question that really gets to the very heart of medical law and patient safety.
You know, behind all the legal talk, there's a really tragic human story. It centers on Martin Wilshire, a baby born prematurely who needed a lot of care in a special unit, and very soon after he was born, he was discovered to be blind. The massive question for the court was why.
So here's what happened. It all started with a mistake, a really critical one. A junior doctor was monitoring the baby's oxygen levels, but he accidentally put a catheter into a vein instead of an artery. Now that led to completely wrong oxygen readings, and because of those readings, the baby was given way too much oxygen. That was the first piece of this whole puzzle.
So, that mistake, it created the first big puzzle for the courts. When a junior doctor, someone still in training, messes up, what standard do you hold them to?
So the debate basically came down to two different ways of looking at it. On one hand, you could say, hey, let's judge them based on who they are. A junior, someone who's still learning. But on the other hand, shouldn't we, as patients, expect a certain level of skill from anyone who has the title of doctor, no matter how much experience they have?
And the court's answer? Whoa. It was crystal clear and it completely changed medical law. The ruling left no room for doubt. It said, and I quote, "The law requires the trainee or novice to be judged by the same standard as his more experienced colleagues." Basically, you don't get a lower bar just because you're new.
And just like that, we got this really important legal idea of judging someone by the standard of the post they hold. So puzzle number one was solved. The junior doctor had, legally speaking, been negligent.
And here's a great way to think about it that makes total sense. It's like getting on an airplane. You never ask if the pilot is on their first flight or their 1,000th, right? You just expect and deserve the same high standard of safety, period. The court said medicine should work the exact same way.
So the big takeaway here is this. The law focuses on the job, not the person doing it. If you're a doctor in a specialist unit, you have to meet the standard of a competent doctor in that unit. Patient safety always comes first. But the story was far from over.
Okay, so you'd think, case closed, right? The doctor was negligent. But that was literally only half the battle. This win for the family immediately kicked off a second, even trickier puzzle for the court. The question of what actually caused the harm.
Yeah, the hospital messed up. They breached their duty of care. But the family still had to prove that that specific mistake is what caused the baby's blindness. And this is where the whole thing gets super complicated.
It turns out the medical experts found that there wasn't just one possible cause for the blindness. There were 5. The extra oxygen from the doctor's mistake was one, sure, but the other 4 were all just natural, awful complications that can happen when a baby is born prematurely. None of those were the hospital's fault.
So, if you look at it this way, the problem becomes really clear. The hospital's mistake was just one possibility out of 5. The experts couldn't point to one single factor and say, that's it. The hospital's error was, at best, a 20% chance.
You can see how this was a massive problem for the court, right? The doctors couldn't say for sure. So how on earth was the law supposed to figure it out and deliver a fair verdict?
Well, the law actually has a pretty straightforward rule for this kind of thing. It's called the burden of proof. What it means is it's not the hospital's job to prove they didn't cause the harm. It's up to the claimant, in this case Martin Wilshire's family, to prove that they did.
So just imagine you're the judge for a second. You've got one cause that was negligent, but you've also got 4 other perfectly natural causes. How in the world do you decide? To deal with this, the legal system uses a specific standard, and it's called the balance of probabilities. It's a fancy term, but all it means is that the claimant has to show that their version of events is more likely than not to be true. We're talking over 50%. It doesn't have to be a slam dunk, just more than a 50-50 shot. And that, of course, brings us right back to this number. The family just couldn't prove that the hospital's mistake was more than 50% likely to be the cause. Remember, it was just a 1 in 5 chance, only 20%.
And so, the final verdict. It might sound a little harsh, but it was legally spot on. The highest court in the UK ruled against the family. Because they couldn't prove the negligence was the cause on the balance of probabilities, the claim failed. So, after all that, why is this case still so important? Why do law students and doctors still study it today?
Well, it's because in solving these two puzzles, the Wilshire case gave us two incredibly powerful legal principles that we still use all the time.
Okay, so let's break down the two big takeaways. First, on the standard of care, professionals are judged by their role, the post, not by their personal level of experience. That's a huge protection for all of us. And second, on causation, the person making the claim has to prove it. The burden of proof is on them.
And this is what makes the case so fascinating. It has this kind of two-sided legacy, you know? It gives patients a powerful shield by making sure every doctor is held to a high, consistent standard. But at the same time, it sets a really high bar, making it tough to win a case if there's more than one possible cause.
Which leaves us with one last question to chew on. Is holding a brand new doctor to the same standard as a seasoned expert a fair way to protect patients? Or does it create an almost impossible standard for people who are just starting out? The law has given us an answer. But the debate? Well, that's still going on.